aware of the insidious evil of human trafficking. I was noting that in your book's synopsis, it states that sex trafficking for many Americans sounds like fiction, but Julie, for you, was all too real, dating back to the time that you were a child in Utah. What happened?
Well, I was trafficked at the age of 31, which surprises a lot of people because there's a lot of misinformation out there that trafficking only happens to children in foreign countries. That's completely untrue. It happens to children, women, men, all of us here, right here in our homeland of America. When I was 4 years old, I began being molested by my father. That created vulnerabilities in me that then later I married an abusive man. I didn't really see the red flags because I was used to tolerating abuse. And I married him for 12 years, had 3 children with him. At the end of our marriage, it was very abusive and very dangerous and awful. And I got a job teaching preschool to try to get out of the house during the day and be away from him. And one of my preschool students' fathers began paying a lot of attention to me and just saying, how can I help you? I know that you're in a bad marriage. I'd like to be there for you. And he just played the role of a nice, concerned friend, which I fell really hard for because I didn't have a support network. And then it was the same man that 8 months later reconnected with me at the time that my ex-husband was being arrested for domestic violence. And he was nice and helpful and someone I could lean on for about 2 weeks before he raped me, and everything changed. He became really controlling and aggressive and mean in every way possible and threatening. And he made me go on these trips with him. He called them trips. And he would end up selling my body to strangers. And we did that for 5 months. We took these trips all around the western United States and over the border into Mexico until I was able to break free because somebody noticed me and thought something didn't look right and was able to help me break free.
That is a harrowing case that you have lived for so many years, dating back to the time that you were 4 years old, being abused by your father, and that matriculating into what happened to you in your adulthood. Julie, the person who noticed something wrong and reached out to save you and help you, that's a very important element. What did that person see that triggered them to respond and reach out to offer you help that brought you out of this disastrous situation that could have threatened your life had it continued?
Yeah, this person, he was actually my trafficker's employer, and my trafficker set up a meeting with him, between me and him, for me to negotiate the sale and the purchase of a vehicle that my trafficker wanted to purchase, a semi-truck from him. He thought that I would have better chances as a woman because he thought everyone thinks the way he does. And he arranged this meeting and I went to it. I had never met this man before, and we were sitting in an IHOP restaurant having breakfast, and the meeting was supposed to take place over breakfast. I was so nervous. I couldn't like even form coherent sentences. I hadn't talked to a man that didn't want something from me, from my body, for 5 months. And this man was really nice, and I wasn't used to that. He took an interest in me. He asked me questions about myself. And then, eventually he just made the comment, just flat out said, something feels wrong here. And I was terrified. I mean, this was off script that I had rehearsed with my trafficker, and I didn't know what to say. I started shaking and started crying a little bit. He tried to comfort me, and he said, just tell me what's really going on. I just feel in my gut that something's really wrong here. I told him that I was in a dangerous relationship with his employee. I didn't know I didn't actually have the words for what had happened to me. I didn't know I had been sex trafficked because I didn't even know what that was at the time. I always described it as, when I did, is that I had a boyfriend who shared me. And that would always make my trafficker laugh right in my face. Like, yeah, I'm sharing you. Um, but I didn't have the words for it. So I didn't come right out and say I'm being sex trafficked. I just said I'm in this really dangerous relationship and he does really bad things to me and I can't break free. And this person, his employer, said, "That's not okay. We live in America. You should have freedoms. You should be safe. You have the right to be free and to be safe." And he said, "What can I do?" And so I slept on his couch for a few nights. He got me out of the place I was living with my trafficker. And after, quite a bit happened, some court cases for stalking injunctions and such against my trafficker, I finally broke free.
I listened to your story, and it's a stunning, revealing, and riveting story about real human trafficking that exists right here in the United States of America. And,
Mm-hmm.
People who go through this, uh, mostly women, there are, scant cases of men being trafficked from the time that they were little boys. But in your situation, it's good that someone reached out to help you. Did he lead you to police, and then you mentioned the court system? Because to unravel all of that, it means you have to go through the police, you have to file a report, the court system. Did you find that the system, once it realized what was happening to you, was supportive of you? Law enforcement, the judicial system, and even those who would reach out to help you deal with the mental duress that you would go through because of this?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because I was too afraid to push criminal charges against my trafficker. Once I got free from him, I really was at the mindset I just need to distance myself from him and never see him again because he'll come after me. He stalked me for 3 years, even though I was then married, and he moved his children from their location at an elementary school to my children's location so that he could see me twice a day. And he just kept this pressure on me so that I wouldn't reveal what he had done. And it worked. I did not tell anyone. So I did not fully disclose the extent of his abuse until like 5 years later when I was in therapy.
Wow.
But at that point, when I really was able to confront it, not only to myself but to others, and tell my story, what had happened, I had found out that my trafficker was actually in jail on a customs hold, and that he was facing deportation. I figured that my chance at filing criminal charges was kind of running thin, my time, and I decided to join the trial against him for deportation. So I contacted the Department of Homeland Security, and at the 11th hour in his trial, I volunteered to testify, and they took me up on that offer, and I talked many, many hours with the prosecutor, and I finally came and testified 3 different times in front of my trafficker with the Department of Homeland Security, and it disclosed everything, every little detail, every horrible, horrible detail that he did to me and put me through. And it was a really difficult process, but I found like the people around me were so supportive. The judge, the prosecutor was so supportive. I was assigned a victim advocate who sat through the trial with me. She was incredible. I really did feel very supported by the system.
Julie, good for you. And I mean that in all sincerity. I'm glad that you were able to uh, get this guy out of your life, and you had the support of a very sensitive and proactive system to help you. We're going to take a break. We want to unpack your story a little bit more after the break. You are watching America's Hope here on NTD. I'm talking to Julie Whitehead. We're coming back with more of her powerful and riveting story of triumph over a very difficult situation. That's next on America's Hope.
Communist barely as a culture talked about child abuse, and yet from the ages of 6 months to 17 years old, I was trafficked by familial members, family members, immediate and extended. And in those days, again, there was nowhere to go. So at the age of 5, I just thought it would be better to be dead. And that was my first attempt at suicide. And that's where God met me in my life. So as I sat on the curb of the house waiting to jump in front of a car that never actually came that day, I just heard this voice that said, "This is not the plan I have for you. Suicide is not the answer." And in that moment, I went up and leaned against a garage and I just said, "If you keep me alive, I'll do whatever you call me to do." Because I was a little kid and I figured anyone who can make that huge blue sky and do all of that, maybe they'd be greater than the people that hurt me. And then at 17, that was the last time my birth mother tried to kill me.
Wow. What took place at 17?
There was some kind of a tiff, and my birth mother came in and she had her hands around my throat, and she was literally shaking me, punching her, trying to punch her fingers through my throat. And I thought in that moment, as she threw me back again, I thought, this time I really am going to die, but at least I won't be with them. And the only good and decent thing my birth father did was he actually showed up somehow and pulled her off of me. And I ran out into the night and I realized I don't have money, I don't have friends, I don't have family to go to, and where am I going to go? And the nearest police station would be a couple miles away. But at 17, I was still a minor, so I would still have been sent back to the home. So I snuck back into the house in the night and I thought, I'm a loser, I'm a coward, I can't even kill myself, I can't get out of here, and that wasn't true. But in that moment of desperation, you don't know how to end it or how to get out of it.
You know, Andy, so many young teenagers are in situations similar to what you've just described, and they don't know where to turn. Things have changed, but they still need a place to turn to, someone to go to in situations like this. What's your advice to young people in America who are experiencing some familial abuse or abuse from a friend or a gang of people that just want to set upon them, and do some harm?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things, if there's any way that they can get a hold of our helpline and hotline numbers on our website, voicesagainsttrafficking.com, or if they have a way to trust anyone, even if it's a peer. A lot of times, a friend, if they're a real friend, will help find a way, but they need to speak to somebody that they can trust. And sometimes even a stranger on the other end of a helpline is better than no one at all. But to those kids out there, you are not alone. And if you can email, text, or call Voices Against Trafficking, there will be someone there to listen and to try to help you.
You just mentioned you were not alone. And certainly at 17, you felt alone, but you still managed to escape. How did you do that?
Well, that time I was young, but I started college, and that was the first time that I actually saw how other people lived, how other teenagers. I had never even been to a movie by myself. By the time I turned 18, that was the first time I ever got to go to a movie without being controlled, monitored, or some other thing. And so I realized that, oh my gosh, there's a world out there, right? But I was so naive that it opened other doors for almost was date raped, had other people try to take advantage of me. But, Kelly, God was always with me. And when I needed help and desperation, somehow he showed up or someone showed up just in the nick of time. And I finished early and I thought, I'm going to go help other kids. I need to help people that were like me so no one has to suffer like I did.
You've gone on to write 2 books that we know of. A Fragile Thread of Hope, One Survivor's Quest to Rescue is one of the books, and then Voices Against Traffic, and against trafficking. And so you're now selling those books on Amazon, and I understand other places, but 45% of the net proceeds are going to victims of child abuse and sex trafficking. So your voice, your organization, Voices of Human Trafficking, you're being heard around the world. You're going around the world talking to people, challenge them to get involved in fighting the scourge of human trafficking. Explain to me what your organization is doing now to help people understand, become more aware, and then take action.
Absolutely. First and foremost, we're like a network of networkers. So think of us as a hub of a wheel, and that's Voices Against Trafficking. And all these folks are individuals, media members, companies, nonprofits, and collectively we have a more powerful voice together. And that was one of those God nudges in the middle of the night. More voices. You need to get more voices. And so that's what I did. And what happened now is, yes, we have the books. We have a second edition coming out in fall. We just started a brand new magazine, Kelly, called Voices of Courage, which is also now nationally and internationally distributed, and in the Library of Congress with our first issue. So that was a huge push for us to get another form out to people. The magazine is what I would call a coffee table type magazine. It's not your throwaway kind. It's something that has great articles. In fact, we're going to have the amazing Crystal Chen, who escaped China and came to America, and her story, because she was persecuted for her beliefs. We also have whistleblower Tara Rodas, and so we've got some great content in this magazine. So we're hoping that it reaches another sector of the global community.
You talked about PSAs. What did the PSAs deal with?
It's just a 30-second animated tip about how to protect your child. So one of them could be developing a code word for your family. And so in 30 seconds, Voices Against Trafficking presents this tip for you and your family, and also about watching what your children watch on their phones, things like that. So we have 10 different tips that give action items for families to do, or for families to be aware of.
Well, Andy, that's very good. Let's take a look at one right now.
Hi, I'm Andy Berger, founder of Voices Against Trafficking. April is Child Abuse Awareness Month, and here's a tip. Teach your children that they have rights. When your children are taught they're special and have the right to be safe, they're less likely to think abuse is their fault and more likely to report it to you or another safe adult. For more tips and hotlines, go to voicesagainsttrafficking.com.
Andy, that is a powerful message. It really makes people aware of what they can do to stop any type of abuse that's going on. Isn't that where we have to be in life, looking out after our neighbors and being our brothers and sisters keeper and not our brothers and sisters killer?
Absolutely, because if we're not watching out for the next person, who's watching out for you, right? It's kind of the telephone game, the chain of command. But at the end of the day, a lot of people think someone else will help. Just like when there's an accident, somebody else will call 911, right? But they don't understand that every child in this country, Kelly, a child under the age of 18 or under is abducted. They are taken every 40 seconds in America, every 40 seconds. Our children are disappearing. They're being sold. Organs are being harvested. All these things that we hear about are really true. And it's not right versus left as we've been made to understand. It's right versus wrong. And we have to recognize that selling our children, abusing our children, hurting a child, or anyone else is absolutely wrong in anyone's book.
So